in the test lab.
Hey everybody, it's time for This Week in Science and Education. This is episode 87, Photographic Herbarium. Hi everybody, it's Kevin Kugler calling from Virtual Researcher on Call. We're here for another episode of This Week in Science and Education. We're going to be talking today to Anna Eyler from the University of Ottawa, Faculty of Arts. She's going to be talking about Photographic Herbarium. We're going to find out what that's all about in just a couple seconds. But first I want to welcome my regular co-hosts, Dr. Thomas Merrick and Colin Jagle, to the show. Hello fellas, how are you?
Good.
Good, thanks. Good to see you.
Good stuff. Good to see you guys. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas, great New Year, happy holidays, all that stuff. Let's get to the show. That'll be far more interesting to talk about Anna. Anna Eyler is a third-year undergraduate student at the University of Ottawa from the Faculty of Arts. And Anna, you've recently been involved in a very interesting project, and it all centers around this phrase that I'm not familiar with, and I'm not sure how many people will be, but it's Photographic Herbarium. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. The Photographic Herbarium is it's an installation, a permanent installation of artwork that's called, it's a photogram, which is produced by laying materials over a piece of photo paper in the darkroom and exposing them to light. So the herbarium refers to the collective artworks that students made in response to the living wall, which has been set up in the new Faculty of Social Sciences building. So Photographic Herbarium, the herbarium refers both to the wall and the artwork.
And when did this project take place?
It was in the fall of 2012. I think that it was in November, although I was in the midst of lots of schoolwork, so it's all a bit of a blur, but I believe it was November. And students submitted as many as 10 photograms to the submission committee, and they selected the 40 top, I think it was 40 top works, and created an installation with the works.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Thomas.
So, Anna, what's the driving force behind this? It's a, I looked at the images up on the web. They're awesome. But who sat around and said what to actually get this going?
I think it was initiated by the Faculty of Social Sciences. They wanted to integrate artwork in response to the living wall. I think it's the tallest one in North America, not the widest, but the tallest one. And they wanted to have sort of an interdisciplinary relationship with the Faculty of Arts. And I know that a few of the photography professors were involved in the project as well, who are in the Bachelor of Fine Arts program, and they were part of the jury, and I think there were also two students who were from the Faculty of Social Sciences who were part of the jury as well, so it was very collaborative.
What's a living wall?
Oh, yeah, I should explain that. It's a network of plants that forms a wall, and it's completely perpendicular to the ground, and it's involved with purifying the air, and it's decreasing energy costs for the building. While I'm not an environmental scientist or involved in the logistics of it, but yeah, it's a sustainable, self-sufficient wall. I think they have to add new soil from time to time, but it cleans the air and it makes it a nice environment for students to study. And
yeah, they're pretty cool. I've seen one before. It literally plants on a wall, and they filter water down through it, and they have various media that the plants grow in, and it sort of mimics an ecosystem. Sometimes you can see transitions from top to bottom, and it's pretty cool. So this was the art project. This is really cool to me. It's an art project in response to what's essentially a science project, this living wall kind of thing. I want to talk about photograms themselves in a minute, because I learned something new today looking into them. They're really cool. But I want to talk about how you decided what to take a photogram of. So when they said respond to the wall, what did you yourself do photograms of, and what was your process for deciding what to do them?
So I went on a citywide nature hunt. I looked around for materials in my everyday sort of concrete jungle environment to inspire me, and I worked primarily with seeds and pigeon feathers. I did I submitted 2 works and they were included. Yeah, I know, pigeon feathers. I used gloves.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I did one work which involved a sort of flurry of pigeon feathers layered with seeds. I was interested in incorporating animals that we don't necessarily, well, not that we don't associate with nature, but that we don't associate positively, and but are part of our everyday environment. And if you start looking around, you'll see pigeon feathers all over the ground all the time. Just need to keep your eyes open. So that was how I went about selecting materials, but I know that some other people went out into Algonquin Park and out into nature to find them, but I was more interested in citywide nature.
Can I ask a question about context before we go on to Colin? I really want to get to your technical question. I think that, but I've given just what Anne, what you've just said about what you were taking images of. You have an art background, and you've been sort of tasked with this science-based content. How did you feel with this kind of crossing boundaries? I mean, was this a challenge to you, or was it something that came naturally?
It came fairly naturally, just in the sense that my approach was to connect myself with natural materials and to really have those materials dictate what I wanted to say in response to the living wall. So I was thinking in terms of humans' relationship to nature and sustainability, but I wanted to be inspired by the materials first and foremost, and then develop a concept from those. So I was working in the way that I normally work, which is to start with images and ideas and then build something that would be in response to the living wall.
That's an awesome answer, and I think that oftentimes we construct the separation of art and science, and that when you actually go in and have a project that can cross between those, cross over those boundaries, the boundaries don't really seem to exist as much as we might think they do ahead of time. Colin, is it in just a normal high school classroom? Is there an opportunity to do these kind of crossings over?
You know what? There probably is, and I don't know how often it's done. One of the things I did, this is several years ago, I did a project that was actually organized through the Ontario Physics Association, I think, called the Art of Physics, and the idea was to take pictures of physical phenomena, right? So I had my kids do this project, and they came back with some really cool stuff, taking pictures of various things and then explaining the physics inside. So there are opportunities there, but I think what you said, Thomas, it's split kind of artificially, and unless it's some of the subjects I'm drawn to are the subjects that are very visual, that lend themselves to photography, things like astronomy and wildlife viewing and things like that, because without really cool photos, the science doesn't exist. It's part and parcel of it. But I think you have to work to bring some of that into classrooms to get away from, say, straight text-based or models or that kind of thinking in science. But the art connection can be really strong. So that brings me to my question about photograms, which I'd never heard of. I'm a photographer and I do a lot of photography, but I'd never heard of a photogram. So I Googled it like any good researcher does. And to start with, I found a Wikipedia page like any great researcher does. But it was good. It showed me, exactly sort of how it works. So can you tell me a little bit about a photogram, what it is, what the process is, how it's different from taking a picture? Because some of the things we teach in physics is how, like, optics work, for example, and lenses and light. Well, there's no lenses here. There's no camera. It's very, very simple, and it's very cool. So can you explain the process of making a photogram?
Absolutely, yeah. So there are a few different ways of doing it, but they all produce a unique image, which is something that is unlike photography. It's like you don't start with a negative. So there are a few different ways to do it. You can either apply your materials directly onto your piece of photo paper, which is a light-sensitive paper, and expose them to light for variable amounts of time depending on the opacity of the materials. And then you just develop it as you would a regular photo in the different photo baths. But there's also a way to create your own negative where you're magnifying your materials by creating a negative with a Ziploc bag or a piece of glass, and you lay the material right in the negative holder in the darkroom, so that the image is projected downwards onto the photo, which is how I developed one of my images. It blew a seed up. So a few of the students also employed the same method of amplifying and magnifying a single object so that it's quite large on the paper. And then there was one final method that I know of that was used, which was to create a photogram in the ways that I've explained, and create a positive image from it. So there was one image that had a white background with just a dark, almost amoeba-like shape on it that was in the installation. And that was created by using a photogram, placing it down on another sheet of photo paper, and projecting the light through it. And then it created a positive image rather than a negative, which is what all the other photograms are.
So when I looked, and correct me if I'm wrong, and listening to your description, I'm getting an understanding of it. So like I've got a pen. So my hand, here's a piece of paper. So I can put the pen on it, and then the light source is up top and shines down. So essentially, the image becomes the shadow of the pen. Is that sort of because it kind of produces that, black on white kind of? So is that one way of sort of thinking about it, that the image on the paper is kind of the shadow, or at least the partial shadow, like you said, depending on translucency of the material? Is that one way of thinking about it?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a very clear and concise way of describing it. Yes.
Because I was looking at the images online, and they're really cool, and I was I'm trying to wrap my brain around how it actually works. That's really neat.
Colin, I'm glad that you're getting it, because I have no idea what you guys are talking about, and I'm looking forward to our discussion on IP packets. Maybe we could go into that now. Probably not.
It's amazing what you can find on Wikipedia, Kev.
Quick question for you, Ed, if I may. I think I understand kind of what you're getting out of this project and what the art students are getting out of it. So I understand it, though, these photograms are going into the Faculty of Social Science, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm wondering what you hope to accomplish by placing them there, and what are the science students, the social science students, getting out of seeing these photograms, or what are you trying to accomplish by having them look at them?
Well, while I haven't spoken to many of the social sciences students, the few that I have spoken to mentioned the idea of integrating artwork into their everyday spaces and feeling sort of inspired in an environment where they're always going to be going back and forth between classes. But I think just in terms of creating an image of a material that can inspire maybe the more theoretical work that they're doing, I would think that would be very valuable. They're learning all about, different processes and sustainability, and to have something visual to connect it to. Myself, I'm a very visual person, so I think just having those in your regular space, it makes that extra dimension of connection to those issues.
That's great. Super. Yeah, go ahead, Thomas. Thank you.
As a scientist who's been in science for the last 20-something years, I can tell you that we're always trying to put things like that into the environment. I think every department I've been in has artwork somewhere. I think people are aware that it's nice to have these kind of things that really are inspirational and get you out of your little niche and thinking about things. We have talked about interdisciplinary research quite a bit on the podcast in the last couple of years, and we're now talking about taking that an even step further. So instead of collaborating with scientists, we're now collaborating with artists. You mentioned that the way that you approached this was the same way that you've approached other projects. Was there anything about this project that wasn't what you had expected when you came in, or was what you expected but to a greater degree?
The very unique aspect of this project for me was just the site specificity of the pieces, the fact that I could see where they were going to be installed and how people were going to relate to them and how they would walk by them, which was very unique, and it's very enriching, I think, as an artist to have a sense of the space, because you never really know where your artwork is going to end up or how it's going to hang, if the light's going to be good. So all of these things, just being able to see where they were going to live, was very important for me. And then just the process of collecting materials. I normally don't work with organic materials in the same way, so that was unique and very exciting. But other than that, I was sort of employing my own process with it.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking here, it's a wonderful way to communicate ideas. And one of the things that we've often talked about is communication from researchers to the public or to students, or whatever, making science accessible. What's your opinion, or what's your thoughts on the value of artists and visual artists, photographers, any other kind of visual artist, working alongside, for example, researchers to help generate an understanding and a communication of what science is? Is there any thoughts in your head about how that could be useful?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the way that I've found it easier to learn scientific principles, and everyone learns differently. So I think especially in a high school, there are lots of people who would be learning in a much more visual or a kinetic way, and so to have different avenues and different methods for reaching students, that's huge, especially in high school when there's so much other stuff going on, and so much frustration. It's just to have different avenues, different ways of presenting material. That's absolutely essential, I think.
I think it's awesome that you make that point. I mean, one of the things that we're really pushing in research in Canada, in North America, is thinking about questions in a different light. And this is one of the big pushes behind keeping diversity, or getting even more diversity in science, that you get people with different perspectives. And part of that is people learn in different ways, and people who learn in different ways may often have different things to contribute to projects later on. I really appreciate that perspective. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm afraid we've come to the point in the show where we have to start our goodbyes. But I do like to give one of these guys the last word. So, Colin?
Actually, I did have one more question. I'm very curious, because you mentioned high school. Being a high school science teacher, that's sort of what I do. Your high school science experience, everybody takes science in high school. You took some. Is there anything from there that you drew on, or that led you to here? Like, is there any sort of connection between what you did in high school, maybe in other classes or science classes, that brought you to where you are now?
Well, for me, high school was almost 10 years ago, so it's a bit blurry. But I was always interested in science class. I've sort of jumped around. This is actually my second degree, and so I've been interested in a whole lot of different areas. I never went into science because of the math component, but I was always very interested in biology. I had a really great grade 10 science teacher who was he was a doctorate. He had a doctorate in science, so he was very knowledgeable, and he conveyed a lot of passion for the material. I remember learning about owl pellets. That's always stuck with me, but nothing that I can pinpoint exactly. It's more of a respect, I think, for the natural world that I would think came through in that.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Anna. We really appreciate your time, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Thanks again, Anna.
Anna Eyler has joined us today from the University of Ottawa. She's a third-year student in the Faculty of Arts. Thanks again to Anna for being with us, and thanks as usual to my co-hosts Colin Jago and Dr. Thomas Merrick from Laurentian and Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board. And we will see everybody same time next month. Looking forward to it. Thanks all. Have yourself a wonderful, wonderful month. See you soon. Take care.